So here's a short taster of the chat with Paul, where he discusses centre-backs and the Republic of Ireland style.
Paul, you weren't part Dutch, were you? Taking the ball off centre forwards and dribbling up the pitch? A bit like Stamp?
No, I didn't. I had one or two goalkeepers who used to think they could pass the ball to me and I just turn me back and walk up the pitch, to be honest, Kenny. No, because, there's certain players who know they can do it because they're a little bit cocky and some of them think they can. And I wasn't one of those, because every time the ball was passed to me, you'd have an Ian Rush sprinting at you or something, and it'd frighten the life out of me.
Well, it's interesting, Paul, you say that, because you obviously watch a lot of football, the modern game, in terms of how the game's evolved, particularly for defenders now. A bit like myself, you see kind of the onus that's been put on them when keepers in possession to drop to the edge of the 18-yard box, even to the edge of the 6-yard box now, and look to play in that area of the pitch, even under pressure, and that's kind of demanded of defenders now. Would you have been comfortable in that environment, being asked to play in that manner?
I would have said, Kenny, to be honest, that is so. It's some of the most ridiculous football that I've ever seen, because it invariably ends up with someone taking it off them and putting it in the back of the net. I don't understand that part of the game that they're trying to, make normal in football. I don't think it's not a normal way to play football.
Yeah. Probably very similar to you, but of course people are kind of roll their eyes if you make this argument. People, look, you're a different generation, you're old school, Neanderthal, what do you know? Well, this is it. Yeah, but the basic.
Are you joining me on that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I would, Paul. Yeah, because I think the basic, probably what you are saying is kind of, I think the basic fundamentals of the game still haven't changed, have they? Kind of 20, 30 years on, particularly from a defensive point of view.
We're supposed to defend. We're supposed to give it to the people who can play in midfield. They're supposed to give it to the lads who score the goals up front. And I don't think, I've seen people now that can cross the ball into the goalkeeper's area, and they just turn out because they want their stats come up. So they want to know they've had a certain amount of touches on the ball and stuff like that.
Passes completed.
That's not the way I played football. I didn't grow up playing that way, so maybe I really am the dinosaur of this thing. But
I think, Paul, you would have been able to play centre back today. You're like, so when Jack played you in midfield, you had responsibility to get on the ball and pass the ball, and so you clearly were capable of passing the ball, and like, I don't think there's anything Virgil van Dijk can do that you wouldn't have been able to do.
Oof.
Has he got that big diag, Paul? Has he got that 40, 50-yard diag?
That I can't. But he's a one-off where he's so comfortable on the ball. He will take it from any part of the pitch, and he can pass the ball obviously way better than I could ever pass the ball. No, the players are obviously much more adapted to doing what their managers want them to do. But we played a certain way, and you just didn't pass the ball around the back because you knew there was going to be an Ian Rush or a quicker player, or they'd come in at you like a light and just take the ball off you and score a goal, make you look foolish, basically.
Have things moved on, David Meyler? Is Paul right? What did you expect from your defenders when you were playing not too long ago?
Well, first and foremost, I think we'd all agree that Paul McGrath could play in the modern era and he would be totally comfortable playing out from the back. I don't think that would be a problem. Look, JD, when I played in the championship with Hull, we played out a lot of the time. That was kind of just the way it was. We almost had the arrogance that we could play out and we were comfortable doing it. When you went into the Premier League, it's totally different. Like, you look at, we spoke about Man City earlier, the way they set up for Chelsea. Chelsea just needed to knock it long today. Not for the whole game, but kind of push Man City back so that they could, build up a relationship to be able to build out and play out and, be comfortable in the ball. Like when I played in the Premier League, like teams are only setting up traps for you that if you do play out, that they'll be able to counterattack. And if if one of your centre-halves loses the ball, 9 times out of 10, they're in on goal and there's not enough time for, whether it be the full-back or the other centre-half to get back and cover. So a lot of the time, we clip the balls wide to the full-backs up by the halfway line and try to play off the second phase and try and win our first initial header and play, like, almost put the ball into their half and play from there. At times, you see teams that are are over trying and they're trying too hard and they ended up just losing the ball. Like Brighton are probably a very good example of a team that do play very good possession, but you can tell that Graham Potter's working on that all the time. Like I reckon every day of the week they're practicing different things and they're running through different scenarios that they're creating every problem that the players know how to deal with them. But when you play against these big sides, they're only waiting for you to do it, that you'll turn over possession. And even like Paul said, all these strikers are extremely quick, that they will pounce if a touch is loose, if a touch is heavy, if a pass isn't right, and they'll turn over the ball and they'll counter-attack you and they'll be in on goal. So it's you need to find a balance. I think that's the hardest thing. If you remember there was a great example when Ireland played England under Stephen. Obviously Stephen had said that we were going to play this more attractive football or whatever. But that was certainly a game where England were setting up traps for us to play out. And they left the ball go to the right side. And Duffy had it various times where they left him dribble out a bit and they went after him. And we ended up turning over possession 3, 4, 5 times in a row because we were trying so hard to play out from the back. Whereas sometimes you just got to say, do you know what, lads, let's push up towards the halfway line, play it long and look to play from the second ball.
We could not be you couldn't pick a better example of this debate than Ireland, because Stephen Kenny wants us to play a lot closer to Man City than the Ireland that we've been used of. And there have been games where we've shown, that we can do it to a degree. All our underage teams are playing it out from the back. All nearly League of Ireland underage teams are playing it out from the back, and they want to do that. But all our goals have effectively come from direct football. So he's we're trying to evolve. But I think ultimately you have to win the game in front of you, and the game is evolving. So Manchester City will have vulnerabilities, and really good teams will have vulnerabilities in terms of set pieces, in terms of going long, in terms of putting the ball in behind. So if the game is constantly evolving, you have to find a chink in the armour of the team you're playing against, particularly if they're superior to you. And there'll always be a little kind of chink in their defence or something that you have to find, because no one way will fit every game, particularly if a lot of the time you're playing teams that are just better than you. So you have to find ways, and the game is evolving very fast, but that doesn't mean that going long or being very good physically isn't going to win you a game. So Pats played Shamrock Rovers last night. There's an awful lot of tactical stuff going on in the game, but ultimately it's decided by a set piece and an own goal, and that's kind of the beauty of it. If everyone played like Man City, it'd be kind of boring. We need, we may talk about Joe Kinnear and we spoke about him during the week, but I love that Wimbledon team from that, because they were completely different and they brought something different.
But the Ireland team under Charlton was that way.
And in fairness, we weren't pretty to watch, but we pressed really hard, and defenders, you watch games where it was pedestrian, and even as much as Chelsea couldn't deal with Man City's press today, Ireland were pioneers, and Jack should be really lauded for that. He wanted to put teams under pressure, and he said he was kind of annoyed because they started calling it press, and he said, I call it putting teams under pressure, and it worked. And particularly if you brought them to Lansdowne Road, played on a Wednesday afternoon, probably a gale, the pitch was bad, they didn't like it, and that made us more likely to win the game than if we played a different style.
Didn't lose a competitive game at Lansdowne Road for 7 years.
What really interests me in all this, JD, is just taking it back to the coaching of it, right? And trying to strike the right balance in the coaching of all of this. So the FAI, I'm talking a good while back now, again, probably Sean McGrath coming through, so let's say 10 years ago, thereabouts, the best players from the different counties went into their regional centres, and after a couple of weeks, about once a month, the regional centres would play each other at, let's say, under 13, under 15 level, and the FAI brought in, the FAI brought in a rule basically where the two coaches, the two managers of the two regional development sides would both agree to drop back into over what they call the retreat line, about 2/3 of the field back, to allow the opposition to play a short goal kick and then let it evolve from there. And I remember at the time thinking, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I don't know really whether I decided it was or wasn't. I'm still unsure. You could see what the idea behind it was. But then you'd also say, is there any realism in that? And I suppose that was the role in getting the ball rolling in terms of trying to change what the keeper did with the ball at his feet. But I know David is involved with one of the underage sides. I'm not 100% sure which age group you're involved with, David. But I'd be interested to know, with the group you're involved in, is the aim to always try and play out from the back, or would the manager in that age group say, okay, lads, we'd like to try and play out from the back, but if we feel that the opposition we're coming up against is better suited to being a bit more direct against them, let's be prepared to do that? Or is the result just sacrificed for always wanting to play out from the back?
No, we'll predominantly try to play out from the back. That's always the way we want to play. But at the same time, if you're 65 minutes into a game, you're 2-0 up, and they decide to press with 5 players, that, we won't just, the keeper, at the end of the day, the keeper has the decision to make. We encourage them to play out. We go through different scenarios. If they press with a 2, if they press with a 3, I know yourself would have done that in your time, right? The thing is, if it's all circumstantial to the game, if you're under pressure, then do you know what? Let's push up the field and we'll kick it up the field. There's no problem with that. We've gone through different scenarios. If a team pushes 5 up, then that means that there's space in different areas. Do you know what I mean? And we're fortunate enough both our keepers can kick the ball long, that you can isolate, fullbacks in wide areas. Like a great example today, if you remember, Chelsea tried to press up high in City, and Ederson just clipped a 50-yard ball straight onto Jack Grealish's toe. He tried to flick it inside into Jesus, but Jesus wasn't ready for it. That's the thing, is we're encouraging them to play out all the time, but you have to understand that you can't play out every single time. So we're trying to qualify for major tournaments. So there has to be, the balance has to be right, and so far we have found that balance.
As well, JD, and the lads would know this better than me, but it must be about the intelligence of the individual player, because as much as you can't overcoach players because they don't have the attention span anymore and they'll just get bored. So you can set them up tactically to do whatever. But the intelligence of the player to adapt to a situation, and if he's playing it out from the back, he or she is playing it out from the back, and you're presented with a ball down the channel or a slightly dicey ball into midfield, you have to have the game intelligence to be able to weigh that up in your head, and you can't teach that. So that's why the game is just so fascinating. It's evolving, it's changing to a really beautiful game, but there will still be aspects in the game where the player's intelligence. When you're signing a player, Shane, how important is that? Because I can still kind of call you a manager, can I? You're not purely media now, are you?
No. And while you the player's game intelligence, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, so you can watch a player and decide that, well, the one for me that I could never get my head around was strikers who basically they shoot on goal when statistically all they have to do is pass the ball across and the other lad will score. But then I was no good in front of goal at all, so I wasn't a striker. I didn't have that selfish instinct. But a broader point, game intelligence, he or she will realise what way this game is going, or in a particular moment I have to do something here because this is the right thing to do, and you have a split-second decision to make.
Yeah, look, I think obviously enough, I think it's absolutely key in the central area of the field. You'll get away with your athletes a little bit more out in the wide areas, but in the centre of the field, the difference between a very, very good player and an elite player is their ability to assess their whole surroundings all of the time. There's a fantastic clip. Now it's quite old at this stage, but I probably still use it when I'm talking to kids about it. There's a brilliant clip of Frank Lampard. There was a stat that became quite popular there called scans per minute. Basically, how many times does a player check their surroundings in a 60-second period? And there was a clip going around of Frank Lampard when he was at his best with Chelsea. And I mean, I suppose when you think of scanning and game intelligence, you usually tend to think of continental players. But to be fair to Frank Lampard, in this particular 60-second clip, he actually averages more than 1 per second. I think he finishes with 63 scans in a 60-second period, where he's just assessing, where am I, where's my teammates, where's the opposition, if I get the ball next, do I have a picture painted for me, do I know what I'm going to be able to do with the ball, and that ability to be able to take all of that information in. And again, when you're coaching it, Johnny, it's arguably, I don't know what David thinks, it's arguably one of the hardest things to coach, because you probably have to consciously scan for 3 months, i.e. walk out onto the field, and every time you walk out, remember, okay, I have to be scanning today. This thing, my coach is telling me to check my shoulders. I have to be scanning. And you've got to do that for 3 to 6 months. and you'll forget to do it, and you need a good coach to shout in and remind you to do it again, and you need to be hard on yourself to keep trying to remember to do it. And then slowly but surely you're doing it without realising that you're doing it, and you're doing it without constantly having to remind yourself to do it.
I'd never heard of anything like that before.
I've never heard that. Like, the only Scanners I would have known is a David Cronenberg movie, so I don't know what the hell.
No, but here, just to touch quickly there on what Shane said. Shane, I don't know if you've seen it, but obviously you're intrigued by it. There was something Arsene Wenger used to say. If a player calls for a ball, an average player will scan once, a good player will scan twice, and the elite players or the top players scan on average 4 times. Once going. He said Fabregas was the best at it, that he had seen. It is something. It's like, as you said there, Shane. Like, if you're trying to encourage young fellas, that's fantastic, because it is something so difficult. And you'll often hear people from the sidelines shouting, checking your shoulders. And you'll see people just look once. But the beauty is, like, I've often spoken, people ask me who's the toughest player I've played against. And I tend to usually go with David Silva, because he wasn't strong, he wasn't fast, he was predominantly left-footed. And you couldn't get near him. Like, you spoke there, Johnny, about game intelligence. That man's intelligence was just incredible. Like, you think you'd be near him, and then he would just pop 2 yards and he'd take 1 touch. And then you think, oh, he's just going to pop it back to the man who's giving it to him. And he'd turn. Like, he just had this great ability to appear in pockets. And that's why, like, if you go back and look at some of the games he played for Manchester City, like, he's so intelligent. He's a genius that you physically couldn't get near him. He knew how many touches to take, when to take them, when to release the ball, when to just move into different space to open up a passing lane for someone else. But some of that stuff is so difficult to teach. I think some people have it and they get it straight away and they can identify with it. Others, it does take a long time to develop.
Absolutely fascinating stuff, Shane. Scanning. I've never heard of that before, and it's real insightful. Really, really good stuff.